Igualmente. Saludos.
Querido amigo, un abrazo desde por aquí. No es que vinimos solamente a celebrar el cumpleaños, como dice el padre.
We haven't come just to celebrate the birthday. We came because we are visiting the communities on the Philippine Islands.
El próximo equipo de gobierno de esta delegación de Asia.
And we are deliberating about the new government of the Philippine Islands of our congregation.
Porque están tomando en serio la propuesta de parte del gobierno general a caminar juntos. Y pues
I want to greet all of you who have been connected to this meeting, showing that you take seriously the idea of the walking together in the Sinodal way. Synodality is much more than just a technical process. It's about listening, dialogue, seeing and honoring the needs of other people. We hope that this meeting can help to reinforce the idea of what is the synodal process. Happy birthday to Fray Roy, who is celebrating his birthday today.
Happy birthday. Thank you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday.
Paso brevemente a recordar unos momentos también de este camino sinodal que ya hemos recorrido juntos.
I just want to remember the things we have been doing on this synodal way in our congregation. In April and May, we had some meetings about the theology, the theological background. We had a meeting with the Bishop of Essen, who shared his experiences in the German church. During our pastoral visitation of all the communities, we have been sharing the ideas of the synodal way in our congregation.
Se llama esa segunda fase, prepararnos para una mejor escucha, como ya dijo Frank, para dialogar de una manera más pacífica, más fraterna. Y doy muchísimas gracias a Carlos, que se ha hecho un hueco en su agenda para acompañarnos hoy una vez más. Ya hizo el año pasado 2 talleres con la provincia de San José, de Buen Pastor, perdón, una semana presencial con juniores allá en Costa Rica y un fin de semana de manera virtual con los superiores. Y las evaluaciones eran muy buenas. Así que es un honor y alegría para nosotros de continúes caminando con nosotros, repartiendo pues tu sabiduría y tu experiencia. Ya hemos...
Es que me habían silenciado. Ok. Bueno, mi dicono che no, mi hanno sentito, comunque è stato un saluto per dire di questo processo che stiamo realizzando.
Así que
Carlos is an expert in non-violence strategies and ideas. He has been formed with Mark Rosenberg, the founder of the peaceful movement.
Gracias, Fray Jens. Gracias, Fray Frank. Es un gusto estar aquí invitado.
Thank you very much, Frank. Thank you very much, Jens. I hope I can share with you some interesting ideas that can help you. First of all, it has to serve you. Carlos, let me explain that we are traducing actually your conference in 2 languages. If anybody wants to listen to the conference in English, please switch on the button of English if you want to listen in Italian, please switch on the Italian version. We have two translators to English and Italian. Thank you to the translators, which is Father George from the Amigonian Fathers and Sister Cecilia.
La señora Henao, la señora Betancourt y Fray César por todo el apoyo técnico y logístico.
Thank you for the technical facilitation which serves us, Fray César and his team.
Esperemos que sí. Y si no, pues se imaginan lo que estoy diciendo en español.
Si no, pues también habrá una grabación de la versión inglesa que se puede ver después también.
Sí, no, supongo que funcionará esto muy bien.
I hope everything will go well. So let's try to start.
Déjenme comparto.
I will share with you the presentation.
Esta idea, cuando me invitan a hablar, me surge rápidamente este título, porque es el reto con el que vivo constantemente, un anhelo de que podamos tener una sociedad donde la guerra, la violencia, la competencia desleal, la lucha, los abusos.
I'm living a dream, which is a dream of another society, the dream of a better world, where fighting, loyalty, the wish of dominating others has got no place yet. We live in a society where the idea of being better, faster, stronger than others is so dominant that it's difficult to find places of real peace. Generally talking, the history of the humanity has been a history of wars and confrontation. The idea of competition, of living against others, is very dominant in all the cultures. The ideas of fighting, attacking, defending ourselves has a great impact of our way of living. It's a great pity that we have to see the consequences in real wars, in a moment in which we thought that war was hardly extinguished. Nevertheless, it's so present in many places, in Ukraine, for example, where Russia is invading the country. One of the consequences is that all the human energy which is going into wars and into the competition and the conflicts is not able to be orientated towards the great challenges we are really suffering in this moment, which is the changing of climate, education, healthcare. Somebody says that the peace is impossible, but we think peace is possible.
A veces cuando estoy transmitiendo como que se tarda. Muy bien. A lo que llamamos en los estudios de la paz, cultura de guerra.
What we call in the studies of peace, the culture of war.
Críticas, de situaciones de peligro.
Is something that comes out of situations of risk.
la cultura de la que tenemos referencia histórica, nuestra civilización, es
what we call civilization, what we call history of our cultures, is a culture of fears.
Cambios que el medio ambiente y la naturaleza presenta sobre nosotros. Crece asustada cuando empieza a desarrollar la agricultura, crece asustada de que no se vaya a poder.
Looking back in the history of mankind, the human history, we can see that all the important changes brought with them great fears. When we stopped to be nomads, it created a situation of fear to think that we couldn't move. When we started to cultivate agriculture, we started to feel fear because the changes always questionate what has been. So fear is one of the consequences.
Por ponerlo de alguna manera de decirlo, imagínense que alguno de ustedes le toma 10, no sé, 5 años en hacer que una huerta de manzanas o una huerta de peras.
Think, for example, that somebody of you is cultivating 5 years an apple field, and when you're going to pick up the first fruits, somebody proposes to change the situation.
Y es muy poco eficiente para lidiar con esas agresiones, muy poco eficiente.
We have a situation of certain hostility. In these situations of hostility, of conflict, it doesn't seem to be very easy to discuss the questions. Because we are used to a way of functioning where somebody is stronger than the other and decides about what we have to do. Dialogue requires equality between the participants of this dialogue. It's obvious that somebody who experiences that his force and power produces the fruits he wanted to see, he will repeat his behaviors. And obviously, if somebody doesn't obey to what they were saying, they use the power, strength, and violence as a tool of domination.
Absoluta claridad, hay leyendas, hay imágenes, hay narraciones que nos pueden.
The idea we are creating is based on anthropological observations in the history. Obviously, we are not able to create all the facts, but we have stories, legends, traditions that show us that hostility and domination always have been part of the culture as we understood it.
Entonces, el miedo es el que motiva esto. El miedo motiva.
Fear is the power that maintains this system of war, this culture of war.
Una cosa que en sí esté mal, nos resulta práctico y nos resulta eficiente. Solo que lo que yo diré es que es un modelo desgastado. El exceso de autoridad,
this system, this culture is not efficient for us as humans. It doesn't really help us to develop. It doesn't really help us to be more human. And on the other hand, the human energy, which is present in every person, is blocked and can't develop.
Si el líder tiene una postura, pues en los grupos habrá quien se alíe a la postura del líder y habrá quien...
If this culture of bad understood leadership is dominating, they create a culture of fighting, because even if the people who don't want to obey to this kind of leaders, they have to fight against them. In the case of religious congregations, we can see that very obviously. If there's a superior which has ideas of dominating and power and force, the way of living together will be very violent, because there will be a group of friars obeying to what the superior says, and there will be a group of others fighting with the superior. The atmosphere in the community will be of vulnerability. There is no real dialogue. There is no real conversation. There's no real meeting between the brothers. And so we will have a community in tension. After 10,000 years of history, we are still used to see things in this way. We need to learn, after 10,000 years of misunderstanding the real culture, to take care about what we say, to take care about what we think, to take care about what we feel, to take care about what we believe, to take care about who we are. It is not correct to say everything we want to say.
Es muy frecuente que papá y mamá
Another example of misunderstood leadership and the culture of war and fear can exist in families. If the parents are very dictatorial and they tend to impose everything they think is right in their relationship with their children, we will certainly have children obeying to them, submissive children, but on the other hand, we will have rebellion, and we will have children that resist, but using very often the similar way, just fighting against their parents. The question is always then, who is stronger? Who has got more tools? Who has got more strength?
Hagan cosas que son necesariamente las más adecuadas para su bienestar y el de nuestra especie.
Finally, all members of such families can't be really living joyfully, because everything converts into kind of civil war within the family, and none of the members really is happy and is realizing itself plainly. Which is the consequence of what I'm saying? That we are living with a very reduced vision on reality. We are so deeply influenced by the misleading thinking of the culture of fear and domination that it doesn't allow us very often to see the rich alternatives we have.
Esa es la cultura a la que yo llamo la cultura de guerra.
This is why we talk about the culture of peace and inclusion.
A partir de, yo creo que asustada de lo que fue capaz de hacer con la Primera y la Segunda Guerra Mundial.
After the First and Second World War, which were like the symbols of the culture of death and war, we found a human society in real fear after suffering the consequences of what these world wars brought. And for the first time in history, we find real doubts about the validity of this culture of oppression and fear. The foundation of the United Nations, the first time when we declare universally the rights of human rights as a fundament of all human living, we start to see that there are alternatives to war. The Declaration of Human Rights, realized by the United Nations, still is a vision. It's not yet a reality. We are dreaming about a human community, universal community of sisters and brothers. There exists a kind of vision of a world which is living in a culture of peace and not in the culture of death.
Existe la búsqueda de no tener que elegir entre ser y pertenecer, que podamos ser y pertenecer.
It is a new vision that we don't need to decide if we want to be part of a system or we want to be ourselves. There's a vision which allows us to think that differences don't make us enemies.
Hemos intentado los humanos para ver si podemos acabar con la guerra es acabar con el conflicto.
There have been we have been trying in occasions to avoid conflicts as a tool of creating peace, thinking that if there are no conflicts, there should not be the violent expression or solution of these conflicts.
Te comes las galletas que están en la alacena, yo me voy a quedar muy triste y sin galletas, ¿no? Entonces, si yo percibo eso, hay un conflicto. Y una manera.
Let's talk about a very simple conflict. If somebody eats everything we have prepared for lunch, there are several possibilities to react. If I want to avoid the conflict, I just don't talk about it. I avoid it.
Lo que diga el superior será.
I try to ignore that my needs, for example, are not respected, and I create the impression that everything is okay. This is certainly a way to avoid conflicts, but this is not what we are talking about. In this case, in a culture of war, what would we do? We would start to fight. The dominator will justify things he's doing. Just using the power as the way of solution of conflicts. This is why we think that people of different cultures, nations, haven't got the same rights. This is a way to avoid conflicts. If we are convinced that somebody, because of his position, origin, religion, or whatever, has more rights than others, and we accept that from both sides, there won't be conflicts. But this is not what we are talking about.
Nuestra intención de crear condiciones para que las personas que estamos en ese conflicto encontremos suficiente bienestar.
What we need to search is that even if there is a conflict, we have to try to negotiate a state in which everybody has got his rights and can realize his rights, which also means that that not everybody can realize the needs in a plain sense. If there are just 10 whatever to eat, I can't, because I'm hungry, I can't eat all of them. I have to respect that there are others who need to eat too. The conflict is real, because even if I see that somebody has got a need, I need to be able to not just accept it, but to be consequent and reduce my needs.
Carlos, me están comentando a ver si puedes maximar la presentación, porque está como en modo provisional. Se puedes meter en modo presentación.
Sí, lo que pasa es que a veces no veo toda la pantalla cuando lo abro todo, pero déjenme ver, ya lo estoy poniendo.
Bueno, como quieras, simplemente como aviso.
Sí. O sea, sí, a mí no me importa si ven mis diapositivas de al lado.
We are having a small conflict. No, that's not a conflict, but we are trying to give solution to a technical problem, which is that the presentation is, oh, now it's okay. The presentation just was smaller. Now it's better.
Sí, perfecto, sí.
Muy bien. Imaginemos que resolvemos el asunto de la guerra. No sé cómo.
Let's try to imagine that we give solution to the challenge of war.
Estar tan amenazados por las bombas nucleares que se detuvieron las grandes guerras, ¿no? Pero bueno, vamos a suponer que logramos una sociedad pacífica.
Imagine that's a peaceful society.
Entre congéneres no existe. Imagina que tú no sientes que hay manera de que se te excluya por pensar como piensas.
Imagine that you live in a society where you will not be excluded because you think in a determined way, you behave in a way, you behave in your way. Imagine you live in a society where you can propose things and nobody will laugh about you or laugh at you. Imagine that we have found ways of resolving conflicts between nations without war and without power.
Se vuelven retos como cuidar de nuestro medio ambiente.
This is when we really discover that there are challenges, universal challenges, like taking care about the creation. We can use our energy not just to be in defense of something. More than being in defense, it's about creating something, building a new world, a different world.
Donde hay violencia entre bandas del narcotráfico, hay que estar.
Let's talk about the example of Mexico, where the situation is so violent in different ways on different levels. People disappearing, women abused constantly, people disappearing, basic rights not respected. A place where nobody can express freely what he really thinks or who he is. Imagine that even in Mexico, people could live without the need of defending themselves from the risks life is creating. This is so incredible to think about the spiritual and the real richness that could be created. First, peace, then development. Or
si tenemos que estar en paz para cooperar y desarrollarnos, entonces los problemas de desigualdad, de abuso, de violencia, de ambientales, pues cómo los vamos a enfrentar mientras siga.
First question is, in this case, if first of all we have to create peace to be able to invert our energies in the creation of a different world, or do we have to grow on different levels, spiritually, in our humanity, to create peace? I think that what we need is both. On the one hand, we have to create peace, which means we have to invert a lot of energy to create another way of thinking and acting. But on the other hand, we have to be involved in our personal growth, the growth of our communities, and the growth of our churches.
Sino que se ve en brechas culturales, en brechas económicas, en brechas de dignidad.
Fight against war is not just fighting like literally. It is more about creating justice. It creates structures, inclusive structures in education, in healthcare, create inclusive structures within our communities on every level. The structural violence is one of the elements that creates explicit violence. Coming back to the example of Mexico, we can see that very clearly, where the structural violence is so strong that the consequence is a very violent society. We have to reduce the cultural differences that create disequality. Let's come back to the level of our communities and our religious congregations. In our communities, usually there is no physical violence, but there can be other forms of structural violence.
Es muy difícil poder resolver las
Being together in this way, it is not easy to create answers to the great challenges for the communities, but also for the world. And we are in mission. We are sent to create a better world.
Porque este bucle parece difícil de romper. Y además hay un problema más.
Another problem which exists.
Que para que podamos acceder a una cultura pacífica y de inclusión, hay
create a
algo
culture of peace,
que puede hacer.
peace and justice.
Porque la imposición
We
de
can't use
violencia
the same tools as the culture of violence, which means to create a better world, we can't try to dominate, we can't try to
por ejemplo,
impose.
mis colegas que se dedican a la cultura de paz y que se sienten completamente libres de violencia y no les gusta ver el box porque es violento y no ven el fútbol porque es violento.
Just an example.
O no ven películas porque
If they're missionaries of a new world, of a peaceful world,
que no son violentos, se vuelven lo que yo llamo las almas puras. Y las almas puras discriminan a los que son humanos comunes y corrientes.
let's think about people that are so peaceful that they convert themselves into pure souls, which means they consider themselves better than others. And so we are already another time in the same paradigm of violence, which starts when we think that the differences between us are better or worse. Even the saints, ironically talking, that consider themselves more sent than others, won't create a culture of peace.
Y esto es interesante porque, por ejemplo, la psicología ha empezado a volver patológico el luchar, el enojarse, el esforzarse.
Even in psychology, for example, we have found that some theories declare every aggressive expression of ourselves as something negative and incorrect.
A que los sádicos, a que los sánicos, a que los abusivos sean los únicos que sepan.
This is like a caricature of our humanity, because we always have a part of aggression in us, which helps us not to invade and not to dominate about others, but to protect ourselves, for example. And so the problem is much more complex than just create stereotypical ways of thinking about the reality.
Es una expresión de impotencia. Y algo que podemos hacer es no preguntarnos cómo es que se puso violento o violenta, sino preguntarnos.
The experience of helplessness is a very interesting way of discovering how to create a non-violent culture.
A lavar los trastes cuando era su tarea. ¿Cómo es que eso es posible? ¿Qué le pasa? ¿Qué patología tiene? No preguntemos eso.
Not only when we have a conflict, we think about the other part, especially in conflicts in which we feel helpless towards the behavior of others. We are so focused on the behavior of others, and we don't ask what makes me feel helpless towards other realities. And this is what finally creates a kind of violence in us. If I am willing to think about my part and to be responsible for myself and for what I feel, believe, think, and how I act, this will help me to feel less helplessness in my relationships with others. And this is what can serve me as an invitation to share this culture of peace and understanding.
¿Qué pasa entonces si no todas y todos los seres humanos, o la mayoría de los seres humanos, quieren la paz? Si no ven
Surely not
de dedicarnos a algo
everybody
digno como
shares with us the desire of creating peaceful relationships.
aspirar a ser un solo cuerpo, la especie humana, ¿no? Un solo cuerpo que alcanza como su cúspide espiritual, ¿no? ¿Qué pasa si no todo el mundo quiere?
What happens if not everybody wants to share this, the project and the challenge of creating a peaceful world?
La cultura de paz es imposible. Si la imponemos, ya no es cultura de paz.
We can't try to impose it. This is very clear, because if we impose it, we would be doing the same as we are already in the culture of fighting and domination. So what do we have to do? How can we create peace without fighting against the violent, sorry. How can we create another culture, not fighting with those who don't accept this different culture?
No son suficientes para que compartamos bienestar. Ok, ¿no? Entonces yo me acerco a la despensa, a la cocina, y me acerco a la jarra donde están las galletas.
Coming back to the example of the cookies we have been talking about in the community. If I go to the kitchen and I search cookies and I don't find them, I can be very violent in my expression of frustration. I shout to the others, I attack others because you have eaten what was mine and what was for me. This may give kind of well-being in this moment, because we know that sometimes the violent expression can make us feel us better. But the reality is that even expressing violently my frustration, there are no cookies. So there's no real well-being, because I searched the cookies to find my well-being. So what we should focus on really is not a momentaneous well-being. Even if I express something I'm feeling within myself violently, we should search the way of satisfying really our need of well-being. And therefore, I need to create community. I need to create connection with other people, supporting us in the search of well-being.
Voy a poner un ejemplo muy sencillo. En una familia donde hay papá, mamá, hijo, hija. Vamos a poner una familia muy
Let's try to explain it with the example of a family.
Tiene una idea sobre cómo deben de ser las cosas y mamá otra.
Father has got one idea of how things should go on. Ma has got another idea.
La somete a su estructura. Entonces la mamá se desespera un día y hace.
Father is very dominant, and he creates very often situations in which conflict between the parents is obvious, and it comes to situations of even of violence.
Las estructuras para el cuidado de la familia no son tan eficientes y van los hijos a quedar a cargo de estructuras poco eficientes. todo el mundo pierde.
So the conflict within this family will finish with some violent acts. Police comes, takes away the children from the family. So which would be an alternative for this in these cases.
Así es como también contribuimos a que haya violencia, a que haya jerarquías, a que haya abusos de poder, volviéndonos incompetentes para llevarnos bien entre nosotros, alguien más.
The alternative is creating supportive systems within neighborhoods, within churches, communities, and wherever, where people are able to give solution to their problems without needing to use hierarchical systems of help.
Aprendemos a relacionarnos también con dignidad y respeto, entonces menos gente tendrá que meterse. Pero entre más divididos estemos,
of course, one of the key words is education. We need to create an education in which we learn to be respectful, where we learn to live in a culture of acceptation and collaboration.
Y para eso, la estrategia que propone Marshall Rosenberg es ser eficaces en el decir y ser eficaces en el escuchar. Eficacia en el decir. La comunicación no violenta.
One of the ideas we defend in our movement is to create networks in which we can learn two things. One is the efficiency of expression of myself, efficiency of what I say. Talk without judgment. Express plainly what I want to say, not judging others.
Y yo digo, eres un glotón, o eres un gordo, o eres un abusivo.
And in the case of the cookies we've been talking about, there are very different ways of expressing my frustration. I can say, I'm very angry because there are no cookies, and I hope to find cookies because I'm very hungry. Or I can say, this is your fault that there are no cookies. You are fat. You have been eating too much. You always eat too much, and different kinds of judgments and attacking others. I can say how I feel. I can express when I feel frustrated, and I can express how I felt when somebody does something. But I accept my own responsibility for my behavior and for what's going on with me, and even for my feelings. I can say, you are a very bad person because you didn't greet me back when I greeted you this morning. Or I can say, I felt a little sad because this morning I greeted you and you didn't greet me back. Is there something going on between us, or I would like you to tell me if there's any problem between us. What we used to do is to blame others for what's going on with us. What we should learn to do is to be responsible for what we are feeling, to express clearly how we are living certain situations, and try to find solutions for them. Because even if I blame somebody, definitely I'm not able to express plainly what I would like to say or what I would like to do. even if somebody doesn't answer to your demand, you can say, you can say, okay, I see that you're in this moment, you're not willing or able to answer me, but you have to know that I'm waiting for you, and whenever you want, you can talk to me.
Yo en lugar de ir a la báscula y determinar objetivamente si realmente soy gordo, o hacer una historia en mi mente de mis muchas responsabilidades bien cumplidas que demuestren que no soy un irresponsable, me detengo a preguntarme, ¿qué está vivo en ti? ¿Qué viste? ¿Qué sentiste?
First question we have to ask in situations that create conflicts is, what is alive in me? What is really happening with me? Is it just that I didn't find cookies when I was hungry, or is it more? Is it maybe it is a feeling of frustration, deeper frustration, because I think that nobody cares about me, that people are leaving me alone, that nobody is interested in my necessities or my needs.
Si yo te cuento muchas veces lo que pasa conmigo y yo recibo muchas veces lo que pasa contigo, entre nosotros circula la información.
This kind of dialogue, this kind of open conversation between us, which is based on a real self-knowledge, is creating networks of connection, of real connection. If we just blame, placate, or defend ourselves, there's no way of creating real human relationship. Why do we want to be very demanding towards ourselves when we express what we are going through? Blaming is much easier than being responsible for myself when I express what I'm feeling, what I'm living, what's going on with me. But why be demanding with oneself? Because we want to create cooperation between us. We want to create a different way of being together, not based on blaming, defending, not based on imposing, based on real understanding. Because just we as humans are able to create this kind of understanding between us. So create a society in which peaceful understanding is the key of culture, demands from us to create relationships, these immediate, very personal relationships of peace, friendships of peace, couples of peace, spaces, familiar spaces of peace, communities, religious communities of peace, educational spaces of peace, self-care and healthcare systems of peace.
Con más de lo posible y que se escuchen las necesidades de los papás, que luego también se les pide que carguen con lo económico y con lo social y que puedan siempre todo.
Creating these kinds of spaces and relationships is how we can help people to feel on the one hand responsible, but on the other hand not to take care of everything in every moment, to share their responsibilities with others, to share
pero que haya espacios para cuidar la relación entre profesores y alumnos, que haya espacios para supervisar las relaciones entre alumnos, espacios de paz en la salud, que haya mejor comunicación entre los
Even in the health system, we need these spaces of peace. There's so many suffering because of the lack of understanding. Even if the idea of healthcare is always care about the other, there isn't really so much care. What are these spaces of peace? They are open spaces where we can meet as we are, where there's no need to fear that I can't express myself. There's no fear of differences. There's no fear even of conflicts, because conflict isn't anything anything bad. This is the invitation.
Hacernos espacios de paz es hacernos hogares. Gracias por escucharme y
Create spaces of peace is create homes. Create spaces of peace is creating spaces where people can feel received and accepted as they are. Thank you very much, Carlos, for sharing with us your ideas. Great to hear what you are saying. We have been seeing a lot of questions during your conference. If anybody wants to ask something or to give a comment, please use the hand. Use the hand which is on the lower part of the. There's another way, which is just writing the questions.
Liz, tienes que enchufar el micrófono y puedes hablar.
Liz, please use the microphone.
Parece que no habla.
Liz Lugo.
Sí, no sé si.
I don't know.
Padre Jens, te había escrito que revisaras, podemos hacer preguntas en el chat, escribirlas, porque la función de activación de los micrófonos está
So, technical acceleration, if anybody wants to ask, please use the chat.
Q&A o Q y A, ahí pueden poner sus preguntas.
Please use the chat for questions.
Esperemos un momento hasta que la gente esté escribiendo.
Let's hope that somebody is writing something.
Liz, Hugo, Otto, William Montoya y Oscar, vuestras preguntas por favor al chat.
Bien,
Carlos, ¿ves las preguntas?
Sí, ya veo dos. Explica por favor un vivir de inocencia. La verdad no sé contestar eso porque no usé la palabra. No sé si la traducción fue la traducción de otra cosa que dije. Si me pueden ayudar con eso, estaría bien. La otra, ¿cómo lograr ese encuentro de paz si no estamos en la misma sintonía? Sí, eso me interesa, Oscar.
One of the questions is really interesting because it says how to reach to peace if we are not in symphony, which is about people that don't accept what we are doing. If in the case of the cookies, somebody attacks, blames me for having done something, which is being in the structure of attack and defense,
Creo que debemos ser conservadores en cuanto a las reglas sobre cómo lidiar con
But there are so many different situations in our communities where somebody says, I'm liberal, you're conservative, I am progressive, you are old-fashioned. So
la experiencia que tiene. Si yo
how can we create in these situations where somebody blames another, culture of peace?
Si yo en lugar de contestar de esa forma, me doy el tiempo para preguntarme qué le pasa.
In these situations, very often, it's better not to be responsive directly, because if we respond, there very often our natural impulse of defense comes out. I have to take just a little moment of being aware of what's going on with me, and then try to understand what's going on with the other person. If I'm not aware of myself, I can't be aware of what's going on in the situation. Because if somebody's blaming me, it's because of a need, it's because of something which is going on with this person. But if I'm not able to be aware of what may be going on between us, which is based on something that's living this person, I am creating another conflict, not peacefully. So, sometimes it's very hard to create a good relationship with everybody. This is a childish dream that everything will be happy and everybody will understand each other and we will live together so peacefully. This is not real. But what I always can do is to stop myself, to be aware of what's going on, to see my needs when somebody is attacking me, and express it in a way that is not blaming the other.
Sentir que debería de ser budista, ¿no? Le enseñó mucho a cómo llevar su devoción a Cristo, ¿no? La diferencia.
I experienced something like that with a Carmelitanian brother who said me once that he was using Buddhistic practices not to be a Buddhist, but to be more Christian, which means search inner peace, search some kind of indifference towards aggression suffered by others. Another question that came up is, can we create a peace if just one part wants peace? But it's in the same direction. The answer is going in the same direction as before. If somebody doesn't want the peace, we can't have peace. But we can try to create a relationship in which differences can be accepted. I can accept that somebody isn't happy about what I'm doing without the need of blaming him for that. I can give somebody to understand that what he's doing isn't okay for me, without the need of imposing him what he has to do. This would be the key of better understanding. Another question.
¿Cómo combinar los espacios de paz en la diversidad de cultura en nuestras comunidades? Corremos el riesgo de callarnos para no incomodar. ¿Cómo actuar?
How to create a culture of openness and honesty within our religious communities. We very often live in a culture in which the false respect, which means the fear to express fully what I feel or say, is very present, especially in different cultures, in some cultures.
estoy escondiendo que hay dinámicas.
If we don't talk honestly, sincerely, and clearly about what's going on between us, I'm keeping information, important information for the community. If I don't express what I'm going through or what I'm doing, or what happens with me when something is going on in the community or somebody shows certain behaviors, I don't help the other to grow. The fear that creates a false peace is very powerful between us.
Al gritar a lo loco y al insultar y al así, pues nomás me cortan la cabeza, ¿no? No es eficiente el rugido violento. Lo que es eficiente es la expresión de la insatisfacción en la búsqueda no de buscar culpables, sino de buscar una comunidad, de buscar un mejor ambiente.
The main issue of being together is to create spaces where we can grow, to create spaces where
La inocencia, ¿cómo se puede vivir un clima de inocencia?
Another question. How can we create an atmosphere of innocence?
Me acordé de Heidegger. Y
I remember Heidegger, German philosophy, talked about being thrown into the world. And when we are in the world, we learn not to be innocent yet. We are losing our innocence because we learn to judge, we learn to understand or what we mean, what we think.
Mi respuesta aquí más que práctica es filosófica y no sé si va a servirle a alguien porque yo creo que la filosofía a veces es difícil de que sirva más que para filosofar. Pero vaciarme de significados, dejar de mirar al otro como bien,
something that helps us to be peaceful in our communities is try to get rid of judgments, of ways of thinking. It's obvious that this is very, very hard and this is a really difficult way of living. But the more I am open, the more that I understand that things can be different from what I believe, what I think, the more I can be aware of my own judgments that I always wear inside me is when I can be open for the other. And I can understand that not everything needs to be the way I think it should be. This is what very often is one of the reasons why our being together is so violent, because we are so convinced of what we think, of what we have experienced, and we don't very often we don't understand that things can be different.
Aquí hay una pregunta acerca, bueno, la leo.
Another question.
Carlos, que en nuestros procesos de formación tiene que haber un proceso de formación o de sanación de heridas de violencia vivida desde el seno materno hasta ahora. No hay que sanar y descubrir el pozo de bondad y amor con que fuimos creados para generar procesos de construir paz.
Carlos, do you think that in our formation we should find the spaces of healing, healing of what's going on with what we have learned in our life of violent relationships? Yes, I think it's very important to create spaces where we can get more aware of
pero tiene que ser voluntario. Eso lo incluyo como muy importante en el tema de la cultura de paz. No, si ponemos obligatoria la
being
terapia,
aware of what makes us more reactive, towards others, because very often when we react in a very violent way towards others, it's because there are histories in our life that have not been resolved, and we project into present situations what we have been living in other situations in our life. It's one of the tools very important to understand ourselves and others.
Eso puedo decir al respecto.
Hay una formación más bien, me parece muy importante poner en práctica estos modelos de relación desde el hogar, con nuestras familias y desde las comunidades amigonianas. El siguiente, aprendo que sin paciencia y moderación, hasta los que intentamos hacer las cosas bien, podemos terminar siendo impositivos y haciendo daño. Me parece también que la oración permite que Dios nos dosifique y nos mantenga unidos.
Father Jens is introducing an idea that somebody brought in, which is that we have to be very careful with our considering ourselves on the right way, because even if we are good people and when we are acting well, we have to take care not to discriminate others because of their differences.
Pero bueno, una sugerencia es empezar a dejar de llamar al mundo egoísta, porque eso nos coloca en esa posición.
Every kind of labeling people, even if we call our world egoistic, or if we call our culture in any way, the labels are always expression of domination.
No con más sufrimiento, no con más regaño, no con más juicio.
And it's, of course, it's not about creating relationships.
No que se quite la parte de la estructura del orden o del no se, o de esto no se puede y esto sí se puede, por el poner límites y demás, ¿no? Pero que también haya esa comprensión de qué hizo que la humanidad busque fines mezquinos, qué hizo que estas personas estén más interesadas en su dinero que en el
Curiosity, instead of labeling, can help us to create another position for ourselves towards the culture we are living in. What has happened with the world?
Que se muden de una inquisición a un maternaje.
Voy a unir aquí dos preguntas.
Two questions.
¿La paz en un ambiente de competencias o donde se convive con la injusticia?
Si la injusticia es muy grande, no se puede. Hay que...
The question, can we create a culture of peace in roughly injustice situations? And we can't do that. We can't do that. If there's a very great social injustice, it's absolutely difficult to create a peaceful world.
Hay mucho pandillerismo y hay mucha violencia y hay muchos malos tratos porque hay mucha injusticia y porque hay mucho abandono. Primero necesitaríamos...
If there is so much violence, so much exclusion, if there's so much discrimination and physical or psychological violence, it's absolutely difficult to create a peaceful relationship between people, because the surviving is so powerful, or the idea of wanting to survive is so powerful that it brings us into dynamic of war. Maybe in such situations, it's maybe it's the first step is really to
muestren lo bien que se está cuando se busca equilibrio, cuando se busca respeto, cuando se busca armonía.
give priority to the fight for justice.
Eso y viviendo eso, sabrán más qué hacer con las personas que les pidan ayuda.
Aquí están participando muy activamente en el chat.
Sí,
Estoy un poco
retrasado.
un poco retrasado, pero también haciendo síntesis. Entonces, una pregunta me pareció interesante.
One of the ideas
Con las personas que quieren y creen que tienen la razón.
how is it possible to create peace with people who think that they possess all the truth? The answer is like everybody of us. Like everybody of us, because usually we think that we possess the truth.
Si hay una dinámica de tensión y yo quiero crear un ambiente de paz en esa relación, voy a dejar de buscar demostrar.
Maybe the first step of especially with people who are very convinced about their truth is like changing paradigm. Let's stop fighting about the truth. Yeah, maybe you have to search like a different space from this fighting about truth, because finally the fighting about the truth is just an expression of something that is going on in a relational context of what's going on between us.
¿No? No hay manera de entrar a la razón. ¿No? Ahí no,
because normally if we fight about the truth, there's no way of
es como puedo imaginar que esa persona lo que quiere es compartirme su experiencia y que yo no se la
if I understand that someone who is fighting for his truth is searching something more, something that really gives well-being to his own person, not on a level of fighting.
Entonces yo le puedo decir, para ti es muy importante que yo te comprenda.
But the first step of all is that I stop fighting to defend my truth.
Hacemos la carretera.
Create attachment, create relationship. This is always the first step, even if with the most unpleasant or difficult person.
No lo habías pensado, ¿no? Pero si creamos la carretera, creamos condiciones para que las razones fluyan.
If we create this space where something deeper than just the rational reasons flow, we can find the space of peace, of being together, of exceptions.
Una carretera de información entre tú y yo. ¿Cómo hago comunidad contigo? ¿Cómo creo un yo-tú? Nadie tiene la razón aparte, ¿eh?
Apart from that, we know that nobody has got reason.
Una pregunta que va un poco en esta línea. ¿Existen otros intereses ocultos al momento de manifestar o fomentar la paz?
Sí, sí hay. O sea, sí hay grupos que
What are the deeper motivations of fighting for peace?
hay organizaciones, hay
There are organizations that fight for the peace, apparently fight for the peace, but it's
muy mala.
very often it's motivated because of somebody who wants to impose his power.
A veces sí se utiliza el discurso pacifista para sostener.
Very often the Pacific discourse is used by very violent people and groups.
Por eso yo quiero hablar bien yo no quiero hablar mal de la violencia, porque por ejemplo, en México desaparecen mujeres todos los días, y si salen a manifestarse y pintan una pared o rompen un cristal, los medios dicen...
This is why I usually don't want to talk about violence or judge violence, because, for example, in Mexico, every day, many women disappear. And when they organize manifestations and they paint something on the walls or whatever, they are accused of being violent. This is so ridiculous because they are victims of real violence.
Pues los intereses hay que ponerlos de manifiesto de alguna manera, y para que tengan también su impacto, ¿verdad?
Sí. Sí, el problema es, yo digo que sería mucho más eficiente si estas manifestaciones no rompieran ningún cristal y no pintaran ninguna pared, porque entonces no le darían pretextos a los medios de comunicación. Pero es imposible, porque a veces son los
I think in all these cases we have to think about the political and social context. We have to think about which groups of interest are involved in these questions. What we always can do, independent from real situations, always tend to create spaces of honest exchange between people. It's more about being than about doing.
Aquí hay dos preguntas sobre el contexto de un lugar, ¿no? De una comunidad que quiere vivir la paz. ¿Qué lugar ocupa la realidad exterior que me afecta y de la cual soy corresponsable? ¿Y qué papel juegan la conformación de los espacios y los ritmos de la comunidad?
Question about very closely about communities. What can we do to create a peaceful being together in our communities?
Es buen momento como para hablar de perdón, por ejemplo, ¿no? O de escuchar al enemigo. Primero hacen
First of all, we always have to
garantizar que haya seguridad, garantizar que haya orden, y para eso a veces se utiliza la fuerza, ¿no? A veces los cascos azules de la ONU, por ejemplo, primero ponen orden para luego dejar entrar a los pacificadores, en el sentido de los que escuchan las experiencias traumáticas, los que permiten comprender qué pasó, cómo están las dinámicas, y luego se invita a reestructurar las instituciones de ese lugar en conflicto para que no se repita la situación, ¿no? O sea, el contexto es muy importante, ¿no?
The context is always very important. We have to understand what's going on with the context.
Por ejemplo, en mi práctica como psicólogo, yo he hecho ciertas modificaciones porque tengo
We have to understand what's going on in the context. We have to understand what's going on with the people. And this is always important, even in the communities we are talking about. If the question is what we can do in our religious communities, it's the same answer I am trying to give to all these questions about what to do. First of all, empower ourselves to be less fearful in our relationships, to be more honest, not blaming, but expressing clearly what's going on with us.
Hay que cuidar los espacios donde tenemos influencia y los espacios donde no tenemos influencia.
And we have to define what everybody is able to do. We can't do what we are not able to do. You can't do more than what we are really able, but we have to be responsible with the spaces where we really can do something. If I am fearful in a relationship with one of my brothers, The thing I can do is be less fearful. I can't demand him to do things I don't want him to do, but I can express how I feel when he's doing things he should not do. So this is always the same answer in the same direction. We have to be responsible. We have to be improve our communication. We have to be more honest. And this is maybe the key for our communities, but also the way how our communities can be more impacting in our social context. We can't do more than what we can do, and this is what usually makes us feel so frustrated.
Nos quedan 2 minutos y ya las preguntas en grandes rasgos pues están todas contestadas. Queda una concreta que es si podemos
Last question.
datos de contacto para que el que quiera pueda escribirte personalmente.
Maybe you can share. This is more a demand than a question.
Hay un correo electrónico que es carlos.avila@biensiendo.com.
Aiken.
Y
Bien.
si buscan, y si ustedes quieren compartir las redes sociales de Centro Re o mías, está bien, ¿no? O sea, si pregúntenle
He's explaining about some possibilities to connect with him.
Con la oficina de proyectos ya mandaremos un correo a todos los que han participado con
Everybody will have the information on an email sent by the Office of Communication of the General Curie, where all these email directions will be shared. Carlos, thank you very much for your experience. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks to the translators, which have been working hard, 1.5 hours. Thank you very much for everyone who wanted to share this meeting. We have been about 150 nearly in a moment. And after the European summer, there will be more webinar meetings, and I invite you to try to be in contact with yourself, with others, create relationships in honesty, and trying to everybody of us to grow, to be more honest and sincere and clear in communication. Thank you very much. A big hug for everybody. Good night, good afternoon, good morning to everybody, and thank you a lot, and a big Amigonian hug to everybody. Goodbye. Thank you to everybody for his attention.